This is really dangerous. Big Brother is leaning on us. The implications for democracy are profound. Overnight, the US Congress voted by a thumping majority to ban TikTok. They're not dressing it up as a ban. They're saying it's a forced divestiture. They've got to sell it. The owner, which is Chinese, a company called ByteDance, saying it's an improvement on TikTok, but it's actually a ban because they don't want this Chinese company owning it. It's as simple as that. And here, this from a nation with free speech in the Constitution, unlike Australia, wanting the Chinese to divest TikTok. Why is it? Why, from a nation which can't ban automatic weapons which kill school children in the US on a weekly basis, why they're banning TikTok? It is because they can't control the narrative. This is about controlling information. Who is next? Is it going to be Twitter? Who is it? It's a sign of the times because social media, the messages on social media, the news on social media is diverging radically, as we've seen from the Israel situation, from what's going on in the mainstream. The major media organisations in most countries are allied to government. TikTok is not. Now, they're dressing it up also as, Chinese spies. This is bad. They're spying us. They've got our data, all this sort of stuff. Sure, everybody spies on everybody. There's plenty of competition to TikTok. There's Instagram. There's Twitter, or X as they call it now. But it seems to be all about the genocide in Israel. Jonathan Greenblatt, the head of the Anti-Defamation League, said a few months ago, we really have a TikTok problem, a Gen Z problem. Thanks to TikTok, video emerges of what is actually going on in Gaza every day. The devastation, the war crimes. They want to control that narrative as they have controlled the mainstream media. The problem, of course, is who is next. The mainstream has been collectively dreadful on its coverage of the genocide, and TikTok has daily exposed the war crimes in Gaza. This has shaped opinion, particularly in the younger demographics, which aren't buying the prevailing mainstream narrative that this is self-defense by Israel. There's huge disaffection and a higher level of education about what is going on in Gaza because of TikTok and other social media. It is critical to democracy, critical to the knowledge of the population which votes to know what is going on in these situations. And especially in this one, which is all about the decline of American imperialism and American prestige and authority in the world because they're funding it along with Australia and the UK. Is Australia going to be next? Is Australia going to ban TikTok as well? I bet there are plenty of voices who'd like to see it gone. Critics of the bill say that the bill allows the federal government in the US to force the sale of any social media platform that is accused of, quote, interfering in elections. Well, that's a very subjective element, isn't it? Interfering in elections. If somebody is deemed to be interfering in elections, possibly not just towing the government's line, that social media platform can be banned. What is interfering in elections? Is it possibly just providing information which shapes opinion which the government dislikes? Meanwhile, in Australia, things are heading in a similar direction. The government's proposing to enact the Misinformation and Disinformation Bill. The draft legislation released for consultation last year would have allowed the Australian Communications and Media Authority, this sort of lame duck media regulator, which never goes after Murdoch or Nine, to require social media companies to toughen their policies on content that is false, quote, content that is false, misleading or deceptive, and where the provision of that content on the service is reasonably likely to cause or contribute to serious harm, end quote. Very subjective again. The government doesn't like it, they can ban it. They can penalise people for misinformation or disinformation. And of course, who gets a carve-out? Who gets relief from having to obey these laws? You guessed it, the government's media mates, which are already being paid cash through the digital media bargaining code, that farce of a law which props up fossil media. And when the government got into office, Attorney General Mark Dreyfus held a media roundtable. We didn't know what this was about. Rex Patrick came back with the FOIs, and then we knew what it was all about. It wasn't about press freedom. Julian Assange was mentioned, but once or twice it was about spies cozying up to big media. As it turned out, the event, whose invitees were all mainstream media, it had been organised by the National Security Information Branch of the Attorney General's Department, this media roundtable. Media is meant to be on the outside, holding government to account. And here they were schmoozing it up, secretly, Chatham House rules, with a room full of spooks. The idea is all about forging closer ties between the spies and the media, between the national security establishment and the media operators. It's about cooperation, not holding government to account. It's about what's supposedly good for the country. We know what that means, what's good for the government. Exactly the opposite of journalism. At least in America, where they're trying to shove through this TikTok bill, which looks like it's a fait accompli now, freedom of speech is actually enshrined in the Constitution. There's not the ridiculous defamation laws that we have here. Much higher standard for defamation laws or libel laws. Here, it's not. Already this year, in the first 6 weeks of this year, we've had 2 legal threats at Michael West Media, both designed to muzzle free speech. Both stories in question that were attacked on by lawyers are correct. In both cases, lawyers demanded we take them down entirely. Defamation lawyers are running rampant, and of course we know who has access to defamation lawyers: wealthy people with resources to pay them, people with money that can use lawyers to stymie free speech. At least they don't have that in America. And while all this is going on, the promised revamp of the FOI system, the Freedom of Information system, has just not happened. Got whistleblowers being persecuted all over the place, and this week the government refused to say where nuclear waste is going to be buried from the AUKUS deal, because we're going to bury the US and UK's nuclear waste as well. We never had a referendum about that. We've never even had a public debate. We cannot get decent information on arms exports to Israel, arms exports to any brutal foreign government, because, NatSec. Our correspondent Rex Patrick, who's a prolific FOI merchant, says secrecy has got no better under the current government, although they are better on other issues. This correspondent, we've never seen such flagrant misinformation and disinformation from the media as in the past few months. It is getting worse. This, as repressive government initiatives are upon us to curb free speech, mis- and disinformation bill, and as large corporate institutions are ever closer to government and to big media. Whistleblowers in jail, Julian Assange, David McBride facing 50 years in prison. Tony Watson, we've got an excellent story running from him up the top of the website at the moment, the Lend-Lease whistleblower that saved $300 million for the Commonwealth by blowing the whistle on Lend-Lease's dodgy tax practices and PwC. They're there, of course. He's, while the other guys are awaiting sentencing, he's had to put his house on the line, this guy. His career's gone for doing the right thing. It's out of hand. We need less secrecy in democracy so people know what is going on. Particularly today, I thank you for your support, because we can't do this without community assistance, and it's been fantastic and a privilege, of course, to be able to do this for the community. But it is hard yakka copping all these lawsuits all the time. So if you can throw us a few bucks, please do. Otherwise, share, comment, and like in the section below. Thank you.